Single-minded fury or dual wield spec is the meta right now, and a lot of it is due to deep wounds. But that probably surprises a lot of people because you would think that weapons that hit harder or at least have higher damage stats would be the ones with better deep wounds damage. Looking at these two weapons, we can see that the Talwar has about 45 less bottom end and top end damage than the Deadly Strike of the Hydra. And the Deadly Strike of the Hydra is also about 30% slower, so it scales a little better with AP. Yet the Talwar apparently would do more damage with deep wounds, even though deep wounds is based on the average weapon damage. Let's dig into how that works. Now, first, let's just refresh on the weapon damage formula. The way it works is that for every 14 AP you have, so your AP divided by 14, your weapon will hit for its attack speed more in damage. So attack speed, ATK speed. So that means if you had 14 extra AP, you'd add 3.5 damage to a swing from the Hydra, but you'd only add 2.7 damage onto the Talwar. And not that it really matters, but on an offhand, you just half this. So you just divide it by 2 again, and that's how you find it out for a offhand weapon. Now, this is just another reason that would make you think Deadly Strike of the Hydra should hit harder on deep wounds. But let's go one layer deeper into this. We have to think about, well, what else does dual wield spec get? And it gets single-minded fury, which is 10% extra damage. However, 10% extra damage still doesn't really seem to explain how the Darkwater Talwar can be so good. I mean, like, let's think about it. It's a 2.7 speed weapon. We're going to make it hit 2.7 harder. So that's pretty similar to it being 2.7 slower. So we're 2.7. Let's say, okay, yeah, so it's 10% harder, which is similar to 10% slower. So this means 2.7, you know, it gains a 0.27. Let's just round it up and say that. That means it's basically going to hit as hard as a 3-speed two-hander after this talent. But that's still less than the 3.5 that we could be getting from this Deadly Strike of the Hydra. So where does this extra damage come from? And that comes from deep wounds being on the Wrath of the Lich King client edition for deep wounds. I'm not saying for all the talents, but that's how deep wounds is implemented. So if you went on Classic era, you wouldn't have this same behavior. Now let's dig into what this wrath behavior means. Well, it means that the actual damage on the deep wounds is multiplied by all the bonuses you have. So this single-minded fury, it's not actually a 10% bonus. It's like a 10% squared bonus. And that's how come this ends up being so good, because you see, with just having it be a 10% squared bonus, then instead of us saying that we get to take this 2.7 speed weapon to a 3 speed, we get to basically take the 2.7 speed weapon to a 3.3 speed weapon. So now what you really have, if you want to simplify it, is a 3.3 speed one-hander scaling versus a 3.5 speed two-hander. They're both affected the same way from the AP to weapon damage formula, but you also have an offhand that is getting you additional procs when you are using this dual wield spec with the simulated 3.3. And in reality, it's not a 3.3. It is 2.7. It just has similar DPS characteristics to a 3.3. So you are going to be hitting the boss. Let's see, in a 7-second period, you'd get 2 hits with your Deadly Strike, so 2, yay. And in the same period, you'd get 3 hits on your main hand. And then your offhand, if it was one of the optimal items, it'd be a 1.2 speed, so you'd get like 5 on your offhand. And this is why Deep Wounds is better on a dual wield spec, because it hits nearly the same per instance of damage because of the double diffing, but you also just have way more procs of it. And because it is the Wrath of the Lich King client version, the procs are never wasted.